When you're facing cancer, you need to know how to advocate for yourself without guilt, fear, or being dismissed. In this episode, we're going to arm you with 3 strategies that work. First, you'll learn how to draft and design your all-star team by treating it like an org chart, identifying the right people, and opening lines of communication before you need them. Second, you're going to learn how to tackle the insurance game and win, knowing that denials are often wrong and you can succeed and prevail in your appeal. And third, we're going to share how to embrace active mindfulness, not toxic positivity, and how you can use your focus to stay in fighting shape, find moments of joy, and navigate this health issue. My guest on this episode is Rebecca Bloom, a leading women's health advocate who has empowered thousands of women. She's a former attorney, and she's the author of When Women Get Sick. Let's start kicking cancer's ass. You have a perspective that the healthcare system disadvantages women. And I'd love for you to unpack that. What do you mean? How does that show up? And, what can we do about it?
So first of all, women are more under-resourced and underemployed, the top line issue. So that trickles down because of all the economics that ensue. They may not have the best coverage to be able to take advantage of the best treatments. They may not even have access to the more cutting edge ones. They may have to wait a lot longer for their treatment. Those are all big deals, and they may not even have coverage to begin with because of some of that when you back it up. The second thing is that women are so endemically under-researched. And again, just like the under-resourced, underemployed thing, this is historical, it's systemic, and it ripples through in so many ways that are unseen. Going back to your phrase, invisible barriers, right? So when it comes to under-researching, well, there may be things out there that a woman and even her doctors don't see as readily apparent applying to women, applying to straight line thinking. There may be a drug that was used for a different thing that could work really well for a woman's cancer. Another thing, building on these two things, is if a woman has no coverage or less good coverage, her doctors are going to have less time to spend with her and on her case. Those are just hard facts. There's going to be less digging for what might be out there.
Some of the other invisible barriers that I think you've seen in your research and I've seen in my journey talking to so many people, women's complaints are often not heard as serious, right? They're told it'll be okay, you're being hysterical, you're being oversensitive. And it takes a lot of fortitude you have to say, I'm going to sit here until we figure out what's wrong. You can't dismiss me. So many people are diagnosed at a later stage because they were a woman and nobody listened to them.
That's absolutely true, Joelle. And one need not look far to find real proof of this. I don't know if you've ever listened to the Retrievals podcast that really highlights the fact that women's pain is categorically and systematically dismissed. So there's that. And then there's the age-old hysteria problem. And that hysteria problem goes beyond just American culture and our particularly...
It's Greek or Roman.
It is Greek. And Dr. Elizabeth Komen, who is a wonderful oncologist in New York, wrote an amazing book called All in Our Head that traces the history of this hysteria problem.
When I saw the name of your book, When Women Get Sick, I thought about how much women can often try to ignore signals from their own body because in addition to working, they're working. The primary child care coordinator, if they have children, they're often the care coordinator for older parents. There's a whole bunch of articles about how tired women are of parenting their partners in their lives and taking care of everything. But if you're busy taking care of everyone else and everything else, you might think your fatigue is just fatigue.
That's really true. Women hold up the sky. Women keep the culture going. Women are the project managers for everybody else's life. That's absolutely the case. And you're right. That does keep us from recognizing and owning and responding to our pain, our discomfort, our symptoms. And the last thing I want to say before we move on this invisible barriers thing, we have a system where third party payers end up solidifying what constitutes the standard of care.
Right.
So if you're already behind the eight ball in all these ways that we mentioned, and so many women are, how are you going to know to ask for what's behind the curtain? You get told, this is what we do, this is how we treat this is what's available. You're going to be more poised to accept that because you've been conditioned to do that.
What does it mean to have someone like you advocating as you're going through a healthcare crisis? What are the steps? What do you do?
So, this is really a big part of my book, Joelle, because I know that how you line up your support when you're on a health journey can make a huge difference. Huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time talking about what it means to draft your team because people tend not to think about it the way experience has taught me to think about it. Too often people do this catch-all cry for help when they hit the wall. And what I'm arguing for instead is more like a methodical, proactive approach. And it's not always your loved ones who should be your go-to, unless they have that type A personality and they need that. And some do. But some of them have their own fears, concerns, and pressures. And that needs to be brought into the story too, because caregivers matter and they need to be sustained as well. So what do I mean by draft your team? I mean, find the people who have the skills you need. Nobody hesitates when we're dealing with business to craft an org chart. We do it all the time, right? We
Absolutely.
say, who's the best person for this? Who's the best person for that slot? But there's a lot of reticence about asking for help and filling these lanes when you're on a health journey. And there shouldn't be. And one of the best pieces of advice that I have seen works the best is think about how you want to have the conversation at the beginning before it's a hot moment and the need is there. Ask to open the line of communication in advance. What does that look like? It's really simple. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm starting on a health journey. It would mean so much to me if I knew that I could ask for your help when I run into trouble with, okay, fill in the blank, a bill, access to appointments, problems getting pre-approval, advice about a clinical trial, my benefits, whatever that person's expertise happens to be. Then you've got a non-stranger expert at the ready.
I think that's a great recommendation. And I think one of the things people worry about is if I tell people I'm dealing with a health issue, let's say the point about benefits, if I tell someone I work with, I'm going to be treated differently at work. And I think it's important that we continue to sound the bell that people dealing with a health issue are still people. Many of them are more than capable of working and want to because it feels normal. So they might need more flexibility, but don't make choices for us. Amy Tully-Lotka, when she was on the podcast, talked about the one thing she told all of her clients is don't decide for me. Ask me and I'll let you know what I can do, but don't decide for me. I think putting people on the playing field, I use a baseball metaphor, right? So I was a lot less specific, partially because I didn't need some of the things you were talking about, but I was clear, hey, I'm going to need people for rides. I'm going to need people for food. I'm going to do some travel. These are the ways I will be asking for help. And if you don't, that's okay. But you made a really good point. When you ask the universe or the people you know, the people who show up and who want to help are not always the people you expect, right? I knew Jessica was a no-brainer. She was going to step up every time. I knew my sister and my sister-in-law would step up. But then people blew me away. There were people who I wasn't that close with who flew out to be with me because my husband had to do a business trip and we didn't want my daughter, who was a sophomore in high school, to be the adult on check if I needed help. Right? Out of the blue. Amazing.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's so wonderful. And it's true. If you just kind of create the sort of runway for people to do something specific, that they feel they can do, that they like to do, that they're good at, they love to do it. So I like what you said about specifically asking for what you need. It's a lot more helpful than, hey, I'm here if you need me. Well, I don't really know what to do with that. And do you really want to manage the list of people who said that to you when you actually need something? No, you don't.
You do not. And, I say to people, if you really want to help somebody, offer to be that quarterback. Like that's
Yeah.
the clutch role. Be that person. But I also put chapter 16 of my book is all the various things people could offer to do, because I actually think it's helpful if you want to help someone to say
That's a great
specificity,
chapter. Yeah,
right?
I love that chapter for that exact reason. Again, when a lot of people get nervous and uptight and they have their own fears that they bring to the story,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of don't know what to do. Giving them that list like that, hugely beneficial. And it's going to work for everybody.
And there's things for all different types of people and types of relationships. One of the most uplifting things was one of the guys I've worked with, who worked for me years ago. He said, hey, I'm really sorry to hear this. Is there anything I can do? And I happen to know, and again, I wasn't particularly traumatized, I happen to know that he's funny and that for years he'd been responding to people. He has a fairly common name, and he gets emails that were meant for someone else. And so he and his brother, for a decade, have been replying to them with funny responses.
That's amazing.
They're hilarious, right? But he had a decade worth, and I said, would you send me one every day? I just would love to laugh every day for just a couple seconds. And he had enough that every day of my chemotherapy treatment, I got an email in the you got the wrong his name.com.
That's fantastic.
So that cost him a little bit of time, but no money. It wasn't it wasn't a burden. And he got a kick out of it because he's been doing it for a decade. He clearly gets a kick out of it.
Right. You knew to ask, and it was something that he loves doing anyway.
I think it's important when you make that list that you talk about, Rebecca, it's not just the logistics. Like there's a lot of logistics and there's a lot of benefits and treatment and specificity to your situation. So when my sister went through, she happened to be diagnosed with a new primary right after I completed treatment. And once again, she's doing great. But what she wanted, I was her quarterback. She wanted a certain type of meals, but she wanted people to go out for walks with her every day. And so we created a spreadsheet, put it out to her community. Every day, we had a half-hour walk with someone. There are things you can ask for, like a joke, like a letter, like a story, pictures of someone's dog that just make you smile. And the power of trapping happiness, of tripping over it. I call them happiness tripwires, where it just comes to you. They show up to take a walk. They sent me that email with the funny exchange. I got the text of a picture of the crazy dog. Each one makes me do that, what you're doing right now. That releases 3 hormones: dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. A, you feel better. Already a win. 2, you're more focused. Already a win. And 3, those are immune system boosters. You don't need any supplements for that. You just need a moment of happiness and to let it wash over you. So I hope those are on your list.
Laughter is always on my list. And, not necessarily those exact specific things, but I love it. I mean, this is what I love to hear because for the message to build and the movement to build, not that I have it all set in stone. So how fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's talk about insurance, right? You talked about this third-party payer making the decisions about the standard of care. You've spent decades understanding these complex rules between employers, insurers, providers, third-party payers, or even in between all of that. What do you wish every woman knew about insurance before she gets sick? And what's the biggest myth about coverage that we should debunk right here?
Okay, so first of all, I wish every woman knew what her coverage actually entailed. What are the copayments? What is the deductible? What is the annual out-of-pocket maximum? Knowledge really is power when you're facing down a health journey. And I just wish it wasn't so scary and it wasn't so arcane and it was clearer to people. And I think that information is out there, but it's not the easiest thing to access.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be one thing I really wish. Biggest myth, that's easy. When you get a big bill or you get denied pre-approval, you think you can't win your appeal. You can win your appeal. Somewhere in the vicinity of, I think it's 3/4 of appeals are eventually successful. And for pre-approval of things, it may even be higher than that. So we have to accept what's true. Denials are done way too quickly and way too liberally, and often for the wrong reasons. Like, oh, they coded it wrong. Oops, we billed your old plan, not your new plan. But you see this no in print and it makes you panic. And let's be honest, there's a notion clearly that some portion of people are going to pay that bill or fold because they don't want to deal with it because it's a hassle. There's even some data out there indicating exactly that. So what incentive does that create, right? It creates the incentive to deny first.
Right.
And we know that's true. So I'm not saying it doesn't absolutely stink to have to be this persistent, but we've talked about persistence already here.
Yeah.
And I think you and I agree being a terrier is the thing to be. It's hard because you should be focused on beating your disease. But that is exactly why I'm so obsessed with that notion of drafting your team. Because the right person on your team, and spoiler, pick me, that person can and will move these mountains for you. That person can disappear bills. They can, because so many of them are wrong.
I think it's really incredible. People don't know that you exist and that is, well, I mean, I'm sure people know you exist, but I want people on the podcast to know that Rebecca Bloom and you're a health advocate, and part of what you can help do is deal with these issues of pre-approvals and denials. So a story that didn't make the book, I did blog about it, but it happened after. When I was told I had to have chemotherapy, and this is something that's particularly impactful to women, I was told, of course, there's a risk you'll lose your hair. And I kind of looked at that like, all right, I'll need wigs, I'll need hats. But I said, is there any option? And they said, well, there is cold capping, but you should know a lot of insurance doesn't cover it. And I said, well, first off, it is usually much more impactful for women to lose their hair than men. There are not hordes of bald women walking around, whereas there are plenty of bald men. It doesn't immediately mark you as someone who's sick. I like to control who knew I was dealing with cancer, because too often the response from strangers is pity and, they mean it well, but now I have to make them feel better that I'm okay, and that's extra work. So I'd rather not have that conversation unless I choose. I said, okay, let me call my insurance carrier. Let me find out if it's covered. This was a very important conversation, Rebecca, because I got someone on the phone and they said, oh yes, cold capping is part of your chemotherapy benefit. I said, terrific, awesome. So I'm going to go forward. I'm going to do cold capping, DigniCap. It's FDA approved. This isn't hooey. I'll follow all the rules about not washing my hair except once a week, and no products and no blow dryers. Very interesting conversation with my hairstylist when I went for the haircut before I started, to say, like, you're not going to get to touch this again. And I don't know if people can tell because we're on Zoom or on video, but I have tremendous amounts of hair. So it is a big deal to not be able to use product or to style it. I said, a wide tooth comb. That's it. And he did it. He came up with something. When I started submitting, they start refusing. And this began an 18-month battle where they're like, well, no, it's not coded right, just like you said. I said, how? What part? Well, we don't have the right diagnosis. I'm like, you're paying for the chemo. How can you not have the diagnosis and the chemo? Like, well, you didn't submit with the right codes. I said, how would I know the codes? I'm not a medical biller. Tell me the codes. We can't tell you the codes.
Right.
Like, okay, who's on first? And let's be clear, like, I have a master's degree. I am a fairly well-educated human, and I'm fluent in the language of cancer. And I'm running circles, just being run around. Literally to the point where I wrote a blog post, I can outlast your hold music. I started tracking, asking for conversation IDs so I could tell them to go back. And then I learned a really cool trick. I don't know if you've ever learned this one. When I tell them I'm calling about X and they'd say, oh, please give us a few minutes while we research it. I'd say, actually, that's going to take you about an hour and a half because I've done it a while. I can stay on hold or you can call me after you're done researching it.
Oh, yeah.
And they do. They call you back because I'm like, I don't need to sit here on your hold music while you reread something that I know what you're reading. And it turned out that it was not it was not explicitly named as a durable medical equipment. If it's not explicitly named, they can deny.
Right.
It's not explicitly named in the chemo. So it was never excluded, but it was never included.
Included. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And this is like threading a needle. And ultimately, I had to go all the way through multiple appeals, and to the point where I appealed to the state insurance commissioner, because that's where you end up. And at that point, my insurance carrier said, we'll make an exception and we'll cover it.
It shouldn't be an exception. And you know that. But at least you prevailed. Right. But again,
that time.
This is a great example of why the system is so broken. Because it's in the interest of these third-party payers to stymie and block and obfuscate as much as possible. And so they do.
Well, and you're assuming I got to talk to somebody who was actually a decision maker.
A little tip here that this reminds me of, because I've been through so many of these. Wait on hold, have these exhausting telephone calls, get disconnected, have the person's number, but I can never get them back. Always ask for their email address as well. Oh. And ask them for their supervisor's email address also. Because what you can do is you can follow up. And sometimes it's just to say thank you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just to highlight that this person who may not have decision-making power was still really great to you. And you want to say thank you to them and be a good human. But it also gives you a line in to a person who now cares about you in your case.
I love that. I think it's really important. And having empathy. Yes, it's very frustrating to be on these calls, but you have to understand the person on the other side has a script or an AI or a set of things. Yeah. And they're trying to do their job.
Yes, they've been trained, and there's a handbook that they follow, and they say what they're supposed to say. You know, sometimes they say things like, I'm so sorry, I just don't have the ability to pull that lever. And they'll say it like 7 times in a row. And you're just like, okay, well, then I know you're reading that from a book. And what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I can keep arguing and I can take my frustration out on you, but that's not really going to get me the result I'm looking for. Right. It's sad. It's almost like they're getting paid to take people's crap. You know?
Well, I think partly they are. By the way, when someone says, I can't pull that lever, my answer is, so who can?
That is exactly the rejoinder.
Right. Like, let's just keep going up the chain and bouncing around. It's very, I mean, for me, I actually had to reframe it as sport. Like, let me just see what I can do on this particular tennis court.
I use that metaphor too. I say draft your team. I say fill the lanes. I mean, these are all sports metaphors.
I think, thinking about it now, I was very lucky in that this wasn't going to bankrupt me if they never covered it. I was really annoyed because they had told me they would. Yeah. They had set an expectation that they did, and then they didn't follow through. And I was like, that's not going to work. I think it's super important for people to know what their coverages are, to know what questions to ask, to call and ask. Don't be afraid of the answer. Knowledge is power. And there's a lot of things about cancer when women get sick, probably other diseases, I just don't know them. There's other financial implications. I built a calculator on joellekaufman.com for people to play with this, to understand how, if you are someone whose work would not give you, work 70%, we'll still pay you 100%. So if you're not one of those people, which is a small number of people, reducing the amount you work is going to reduce your income. What does that do to your fixed costs, like your debts or your mortgage, which is a debt, or how you live your life? So you need to look at that. If you're going to need to travel to get to care overnight or flights, if you're going to need childcare or parent care or care for somebody other than you. So we put all those into a calculator, not to scare people, because again, knowledge is power, all knowledge. Bad news is powerful, good news is powerful. But when you start to see where your financial resources will be insufficient, there are a slew of other possibilities before declaring bankruptcy, going into credit card debt, whether they're foundations, whether it is taking a loan or a pull from your 401k. There are
Yep.
options.
Exactly right. There are disease-specific organizations that have emergency funds. There are so many things that you don't realize exist. And that's why my employee benefits background has been so useful. It's not just that I understand health insurance and those plans and how exhausting they are to understand and administer and interact with, frankly. It's the rest of the benefits too. Like most people don't realize, not only can you possibly pull money from your 401k, but another thing you can do is maybe your life insurance plan has like a premium suspension for when you're ill. And you still have life insurance, but you don't have to pay for it. There are many ways to jigger the bottom line to make it work better.
Exactly. I was talking to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company who hasn't come out yet, but has gone through her own cancer journey. She was asking what could be done. I said, fully fund short term disability for every employee.
I
Like,
love that.
take this off the table.
Absolutely. The backflips that people do for income replacement and short term disability is typically 26 weeks. Imagine if Family and Medical Leave Act times two was actually paid. You
Right.
don't have to take your time and exhaust it. There's the money. That would change so much.
You were in employee benefits. That's not an expensive benefit
No.
because realistically, I mean, we talk about when women get sick, it's actually relatively infrequent when you think about it on a population basis.
And replacing people and new hires and all the stuff that you would have to do instead and onboarding, way more expensive. Joelle, I've seen this over and over again. If I had a dime for every time I had to say this to women, I'd be a major philanthropist. You earn these benefits. They're yours. They're part of your compensation, or they're part of the safety net that we're all part of, that you pay taxes into, however imperfect it is. There should be no guilt and no shame.
I want, if anyone's listening to this that's in HR or is a leader of an organization, call your benefits broker and say, what would it cost for me to fully fund short term disability for, if it's 26 weeks, great. You know, we figured it out for maternity leave out here in the Silicon Valley where companies do fund that pay. So it's not new art. It's
No.
just applying the art to a new situation.
Exactly. It's taking a template for a specific thing and just widening the net a bit. That's all.
That's it. All right,
Yep.
let's switch to mindfulness. Because
Okay.
your book talks about staying mindful, and I don't think I used the word mindfulness, but the whole idea of happiness tripwires is being mindful of the moment and feeling
Yeah.
it. So I would love to know what you would tell people when they're terrified and they're overwhelmed, how to find the balance between, acceptance and gratitude versus fighting like a terrier.
This is a smart question, and I really like the way you framed it because that's exactly what it's about. It's finding that balance. What I say in my book is be mindful about mindfulness. Forget toxic positivity. You didn't manifest having cancer. That is nonsense. Don't get stuck in the memes. I am for active mindfulness, the kind that says, I'm not going to split hairs about the whys of this. I'm going to take care of my mental health so that I'm best situated to do everything I can to be in fighting shape. So it's walking, it's meditation, it's journaling, it's whatever modality makes you feel the most like yourself, that keeps you in touch with your strong core so you can put your foot on the gas and get better. And I'm saying make room for this part of your health. I'm not saying disappear into it. I'm saying do it so you can be your best and be in the moment and stay grounded.
I love that. And I think it's so important. Cancer or many of these illnesses, they can take over your life. And there will be moments where there's no other alternative. You're going to be deeply in what I call cancer land for X period of time. But it turns out taking breaks from that, whatever they are, that walk, friend of mine tries to go to his favorite cafe. Yeah, he's moving slower and he's using a walker, but he gets to go and have a moment with other people in his favorite cafe. And that's a break from Cancerland, right?
Yep.
Those going to work can be a break. Going on a vacation. People say, I'm afraid to go on vacation. They should go listen to Julie Bach's episode because she talks about 25 years of working with the travel and hospitality industry to be cancer friendly and cancer receptive so that people can travel and know that people will meet their needs if they have any. All of these are good for your mental health. You don't stop living because you got sick.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go into our rapid fire. So this is first thing that comes to your mind, quick answers. Ready?
Yeah.
All right, number one, if you could change one thing about how doctors talk to women patients, what would it be?
I think we have to realize it isn't just the way doctors talk to patients, but how patients talk to doctors. My favorite statement on this is from one of my favorite female doctors, Dr. Christina Austin. She said it best. This should be a partnership with the goal of healing. So we're talking about 360 respect, doing the research, but respecting the expertise. And on the doctor side, listening.
Amen. Two ears, one mouth. All right, what's the worst advice you hear people give women when they get sick?
You have to use my doctor. You have to do what I did. Anything where the advisor is asking you to validate their choices. And then
Love that.
also and then also go to this place where they don't use any traditional medicine or evidence-based anything, but it made this one woman's cancer go away. I read it on the website. Okay, no.
Right. All right, complete this sentence. The healthcare system would be completely different
If the operative metaphor was healing instead of efficiency.
fascinating. I think it's also hard because I think most people that go into healthcare as care providers very much want to heal. The whole system is set up to make that harder for them.
It sure is.
What's one question every woman should ask her doctor that most of us don't think to ask?
What's the best way for me to get in touch with you when I have questions?
Fabulous. And you will have questions, even though a good idea is to make a list in advance and to ask if you can record the conversation with a transcript maker, whichever one you want to use. Most doctors, every doctor I've talked to has said that's perfectly welcome. You're still going to have questions you forgot to ask. It's inevitable. Rebecca, it has been awesome to talk with you again. Your book, When Women Get Sick, it's not a guide, it's a battle plan. I love how you've taken years of advocacy, of legal expertise, of stories, real world stories, and created something that empowers women to show up differently, to show up as drivers with power in their own healthcare story. I think that's just awesome. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much for having me, Joelle. It's so lovely to be your colleague and friend.
Absolutely. So, for our listeners who want to learn more about your work, get their hands on the book, how do they find you?
WhenWomenGetSick.com or at When Women Get Sick on Instagram. That's the only social I can stand.
Yeah.
Barely.
What's next for you in your advocacy work?
I really want to keep this movement going. I really this is my life's work. It's personal, it's professional, and I'm super motivated to keep it moving.
That is a wrap for Kicking Cancer's Ass with Rebecca Bloom. I want you all to remember you are stronger than you think, and whatever healthcare challenge you are facing, it's a curveball and you can crush it. Draft your team, put your team to work for you and with you, and together you'll do amazing things. If this episode gave you hope or just another way of seeing things, please share it with somebody else who needs it. Please rate, review, follow. And if you want to get the newsletter that goes with it and articles about people like Rebecca Bloom and Sheila Mikhail, go to kcapodcast.com and become a subscriber. That's the only way to support the show.